You know, one of the first things they teach you if you want to be a teacher is how to deal with students who roll their eyes at you. It's simple. You just pick them up and roll them right back. You're back. Good for you. So let's get to work. All right. So last time we read and summarized a very challenging article by Jack London uh, called The Other Animals, and we discussed his purpose and her perspective, citing evidence. Very difficult text, but essentially we had Jack London trying to defend himself. The President of the United States called him a nature faker, along with some other authors, and Jack London was like, sorry, I'm not. What we're going to do today is we're going to analyze the structure of London's arguments. This is a total grammar error. Don't ever do this. This should be an S right here, apostrophe S. Don't put the S on the bottom. That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Don't do that. I can't fix it though. Sorry. I would if I could. Um, so what we're going to do is look at Jack London's arguments, and we're going to see if he's a good arguer, if he's very good at argumentation. So we're going to discuss the effectiveness of his arguments. Does he cite reasons and evidence when he argues? What you'll need today are excerpts from The Other Animals by Jack London, your Other Animals handout, which is on page, oh my goodness, I know you can find it. It's probably page like 21. Let me start over here. Okay, so Other Animals starts page 17 and it's page 18. And then the Other Animals handout is page 19 and 20. And then we will go from there. So before we start, I'd like you to think about something. Just think about it. You don't have to write about it. Close your eyes, think for a second. Reflect on an argument you have had with someone else. Okay? What were some specific ways that you tried to convince the other person? Don't say punching, because that's not real. If you're going to really try to convince somebody, you have to use some reasons. So think about some things you did to try to convince that person that you were right and they were wrong. Think about it for a minute, then move on to the next slide. Hi there. All right, so I have majorly changed my setting, my outfit and everything. So sorry about the shock. I had to record on 2 different days. But right now in your lesson, we're going to pick up on page 22. So go ahead and turn to page 22 in your blue notebook. Pause if you need to get there. So we're on page 22 in our blue notebook. And what I'm going to do today is we're going to walk through this first paragraph and see if Jack London made a clear claim and if he backed it up with reasons or evidence. All right, I'm going to walk you through this first paragraph, and then you're going to pick another paragraph and decide if he made another claim in another paragraph and if he backed it up with evidence and how well he did that. So we're going to be looking at the article on page 17 and then on page 17 of your blue notebook. And we're also going to be looking at filling out the chart here on page 22. So go ahead and follow along with me as I read the very first 2 sentences of excerpts from Other Animals on page 17. So you have page 17 and page 22 ready to go. Page 17, he says, I have been guilty of writing 2 books about dogs. The writing of these 2 stories on my part was in truth a protest against the humanizing of animals, of which it seemed to me several animal writers had been profoundly guilty. So as we read that, we first of all notice that he says, I'm writing 2 animal. He's making a play on words there. He's making a joke. People say that he writes 2 animal, T-O-O, which means too much, like he's writing too much about animals. but he's saying, I'm only guilty of writing two animal, TWO, which means the number two. I've written 2 books about animals. So they're saying, you're writing too much about animals. And he's saying, I'm not writing too much about animals. I'm only guilty of writing 2 animal books. So he's making a joke there with the word two and two, which are spelled differently. But let's look here. Is he making a claim? What claim is he making? And if you look here on this slide, this is an example from page 22. If we look at this, what he says here, he says that apparently he's guilty of writing 2 stories, but his claim is that he's not a nature faker. It's actually that he's trying really hard to not be a nature faker. His claim is that he's trying to not be a nature faker. He's trying very hard not to be a nature faker, and he's trying to do these things in a way that keeps him from being lumped in with that. So read this claim here on this page, and you're going to copy this claim into this box on page 22. So on page 22, you'll see claim. I want you to fill this in. So pause if you need to get to page 22 and copy it down while I read it. So his claim in this paragraph, if you read it carefully, is that while London did all he could to present an accurate portrayal of animal thinking, he was still, in his opinion, erroneously, that means wrongly, called a nature faker. Erroneously. So this is his claim. It really is his claim in this paragraph. He's saying, hey, I did everything I could to not say that I wasn't trying to fake animals, solving Rubik's Cubes or anything like that, or animals, plotting the destruction of the United States or anything like that. He said, hey, these animals, yeah, I have to show thinking because it's a story, but basically they're just doing what animals do. Okay? They're fighting, they're barking, they don't understand everything that's going on in the human world. And so he's trying to make them accurate. And he shouldn't be called a nature faker. So go ahead and fill that in there. Push pause if you need time to finish writing the claim. And now what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and look for evidence that that's the case, or what are his reasons for saying that. Okay? Go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to look back through that paragraph and find out what kind of reasons or things, what kind of reasons is he giving to support his claim that he shouldn't be called a nature faker. Pause the video, look for some things, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so you found some things in paragraph 1 that it could be some evidence. Okay, so let's look at that together. So first of all, on page 17, he says, I wrote of my dog heroes saying he did not think these things, he merely did them, and etc. I did this repeatedly to the clogging of my narrative in violation of my artistic canons. What he's saying there is, he's saying, hey, I made sure that people didn't just read about my dogs plotting and thinking all these crazy thoughts. He said, I wrote about them doing things. Because dogs just do things. They don't think and think and think and think and think and have arguments in their head and all that. He's saying, hey, and I did that to the clogging of my narrative. He's saying basically like clogging is like it got jammed up. He's saying it was really hard to write this way because your characters, you're not allowed to really see what they're thinking in their head. It's kind of hard to write a story where you don't put what the characters are thinking. But he did that. It messed up his story basically, because he wanted to be accurate. He didn't want to show dogs plotting all this stuff. So his story suffered because of it, but he said, I wanted to be accurate. So that's evidence that he is really trying to be accurate, okay? And if you look here on the slide, he's really trying to be accurate in his portrayal of animals. Another example here is that I also endeavored to make my stories in line with the facts of evolution. And he looked at scientific research, and it's so interesting. So he's trying to be accurate. So he's doing research on evolution. He's making a big effort to do that. Okay, so we can see that we have some evidence now that we can fill in this chart. If you haven't already, you should at least have the evidence that I mentioned. And that was the evidence that he tried to portray his characters as doing instead of thinking, and that he also did a lot of research on evolution. There are also some other things in this paragraph which back up his claim, but I'll leave that to you. Okay, go ahead and fill in evidence on this chart, and then we will be done with page 22. Move on to the next slide when you are done with page 22. Okay, this slide is just to double check that you have done this reasoning on page 22. Make sure you have that portion done. It says he gives 3 reasons. You could probably find all 3. Just give down 2. Just make sure we have 2 reasons there. Move on to the next slide. Thank you for filling that out. Okay, so now we're on page 23. Now on page 23, we definitely see that so far in this article, he's claiming to not be a nature faker. This says reread your assigned paragraph with your group. You don't really have a group you're working with, so don't worry about that. You can talk to the person next to you or somebody if you're working at a similar pace. You can definitely do that. And it says reread your assigned paragraph. We didn't do this. We actually, last lesson, we analyzed every paragraph, the main claim or main summary of every paragraph. What I'd like you to do is on page 23, pick any of the remaining paragraphs. Whatever paragraph is left that you want to analyze, it might be the second, third, fourth, fifth paragraph, might be any of them. Pick one, identify the claim, just like we did for paragraph 1. You'll put the paragraph number here, so like if you're doing paragraph number 3, okay, you'll just put paragraph number 3. You will identify the claim. What is Jack London really claiming? You can paraphrase it. And then you need to list his reasons and evidence. What are his reasons and evidence? This should take you a little while to dig into one paragraph and analyze the reasons. Get that done. You'll move on to the next slide. Pause until you finish this. Okay, so we are here on page 24. This is a major exit ticket. This might take you some extra time. I'm not surprised if you have to work on this the next day. You could finish it now though. I dare you. But it's going to be a full paragraph answer, and it's a full ace, ice, ick paragraph, because if you read the directions on page 24, it says, what makes London's argument effective? How does he develop and support his claim? Be sure to include at least 2 pieces of evidence to support your response. 2 pieces of evidence. So I have 2 pieces of evidence. I'm going to write an ace, ice, ick paragraph. Forgive my writing here. Oh man, that's so bad. We're going to answer. We're going to answer with an assertion or your topic sentence answer. Okay, cite, or sorry, context. Give some context for the evidence you're going to provide. Provide 1 piece of evidence. So this is evidence number 1. Ace. I'm sorry, this is so ugly. Ice. So we're going to interpret. A lot of students I've heard are confused about what I is. I is interpret the evidence. So just explain. Why did you pick this piece of evidence? Summarize this piece of evidence for your reader. Then we're going to provide another context for our next piece of evidence. We're going to have a second piece of evidence. So as we have ace, ice, and again with that piece of evidence, we want to interpret it. We want to interpret it to our readers so they know what we're talking about or what the author's talking about. And then ace, ice, ick, conclude. Okay? Conclude your sentence by restating your assertion or topic sentence. Okay? So this is what your final thing is going to look like. Remember to use proper punctuation and spelling. Remember to use great transition words. It's really great to have a transition word here for context. It's also really great to have a transition here for our interpretation, like as you can see, or this means. Okay, so we can have little nice transition words here. Go ahead and work on this paragraph. And identify. Why shouldn't he be called a nature faker? and does his reasoning support that? Okay, I know that was a lot of work getting through that paragraph, but you did. It was an ace-ice-ick paragraph. You cited two pieces of evidence. You explained that evidence. You used some transition words. You used your correct punctuation and spelling. And in this lesson, we read and summarized an excerpt from Jack London's The Other Animals and discussed London's purpose and perspective, citing textual evidence. Well done. Move on to the next lesson.